Hello, I'm Paddy Kelly. I'm really happy to be here celebrating the start of my 80s. Join me and Marian Shanley as we take an adventure through my journey so far. And it doesn't stop here. There's lots more to come, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, Paddy, let's get stuck in today because I'm very excited and delighted to be able to talk to you about the journey and life. And one of the things that we were just having a bit of crack before we even came on air about was our youth and the start of Paddy Kelly back in Laois. Well, we started at that point and moved from there. You were born in Laois, raised in your homeland. So tell me about that.
Well, I think the furthest I can go back is about 4.5. And I think it's because it was my first day at school. My brother Tom and Mike, Tom was 7, Mike was 5.5. And we all started school on the same day in Killishmeestag. Don't ask me to spell it. So we'd have got the bus to school.
Was that the local school now? Everybody went?
Pretty well, except, of course, we were reared in a place called Protestant Lane. And our Protestant neighbours had their own school on the way to our school. So we went in the same bus.
Now, how did that impact on you? Because were you Protestant or you were Protestant?
No, Catholic.
Catholic on Protestant Lane?
On Protestant Lane.
And how did that affect you?
I'd say really good, because we had diversity at a younger stage and there was never an issue about it.
Brilliant.
Now, occasionally we'd have the priest that come and he might want... I remember my father went into a Protestant graveyard at some burial and a little protest was made, but of course he'd take no notice of it.
That's brilliant. And for you, like you said, there was just inclusion the whole time. It's a big subject we talk about these days, isn't it, really? But it was very normal to play with kids on the street, yes. On the lane.
Yeah, we didn't, there wasn't that many children on the lane. I think there was maybe about four families. Yeah. But the one thing we did as we grew up, we were always, I suppose, we use the word, I think it's coring, we say, because you were saving the hay together. You'd be picking the potatoes. And if there was a pig killed, everybody got a little piece of it. Maybe a few ribs. And that was a kind of normal. But we had great neighbours, good friends. And it was interesting too how we came to be there. Because a great grandfather or great granduncle of my mother's was in the poor house in Roscrea. And he came out. He befriended some neighbours. I think it was the Mitchells. And he used to have Sunday lunch with them. And this went on. And in the end, he acquired, or I'm not sure how, 23 acres.
That was a nice move. Wow.
Yes, but isn't it interesting that when we look back, the whole area was planted from Wales. Do you understand the concept of plantation, the plantation of
Absolutely, but tell me what you know about that, because it's so important that we learn.
Yeah, I think what I think it happened was that it was English policy, because they were in charge, and they moved the people over. And it's supposed to be a certain discomfort too, obviously, because you're moving in. Yeah. And I don't know too much about that, but I know Queen Mary, Laois was the first county to be planted. Offaly the second, that was King's County. So then when we talk about leaks, we sometimes talk about, I say leaks, but it's really Laois. Yeah. We talk about it's the only county in Ireland that's touched by a county that doesn't touch the sea. Now, that might be a surprise.
It's good to know.
Yes, very important.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. So who was on the family land with you then? How many of you were there?
We had our grandfather on my mother's side came over with his wife, or my grandmother, to live with us when there was 10 of us already. So we ended up as 12. Now, I don't know how we all fitted in the house.
Yeah. That's a lot. My dad comes from 13, so I suppose you do. I remember him telling us that they used to pull across a curtain and separate the girls from the boys.
Well, we had no girls except for my mother.
Oh, there you go. I'm sure she needed her space as well.
Yes. But it's interesting looking back. And at that point, we had no running water.
So where did you go? Was there a well outside, or?
Yes, you went and brought the water from the well, and you were close to nature at all times. Yeah. And I remember And I suppose it was the rural electrification of Ireland. I remember the posts being erected. They seemed to be held up for some weeks because I remember they dig the holes and later they put up the posts and then the wires. And finally, everyone got at least one plug and one light.
And do you remember when you were doing the candles and the oils?
All that, yeah.
Right. So we do have had those little lamps that you carry around
Yes.
as a child with the wicks.
Yes,
and
all that, yeah.
That's amazing.
I think my sense is maybe we were 6 or 7 when the electricity came.
How big was that for you, though? You think about being in Laois and the farmland, like.
But it was amazing, and because you never knew about it before. I mean, we didn't know. In the towns there was electricity, but not in the countryside. Then I remember my grandfather, Tom. He was a beautiful man. He was very kind, loved us all, played with us.
Oh.
Non-stop play.
Oh, that's good.
And Granny was more challenging.
She probably had to keep the kids in check, you know, it's a whole generation
I think
thing.
there was an element of that. But she was a kind of bent over as well.
Oh, arthritis?
I don't know
do you
if it was. We heard when she was having her children that her womb was damaged in some ways.
Okay.
But we never quite knew. But I remember she had a sister across the bog. It was truly across the bog, who was great fun. in Co.Laois, yeah.
Did she have any children?
No.
That's the question. Oh, there's a link there, Paddy. There's a link. Same today.
Well, there was 8 of us. Gerard being the youngest. Tom, Mike, Paddy, Phil, Christy, Liam, John and Gerard. And Gerard, I think my parents were hoping for a girl. So there was talks about... There was some saint. Is it Saint Gerard?
Yes. Yeah. As far as I
And
know.
if you prayed to the saint, you might have a girl.
Oh.
But I think maybe Daddy wore the hat the right way. I'm not sure.
Yeah. There's some rules about that, isn't there? But so how did you manage then, as like so many boys in the household, you're growing together, so that must have taken a lot of discipline in the house from... Who was the disciplinarian, mum or dad?
Definitely mother.
Right. I think that's common across the board. Like, I'm a mum and I have to be that as well, I think.
Yes, I think that mother was, I suppose, she'd be being tested too.
Yeah.
Different times I remember testing her myself.
Yeah.
And I had got a little bit of a beating on the legs. No, it wasn't serious, but I didn't like it.
You got a clip there, Paddy, wasn't
yes.
it?
Yes.
Clip on the leg.
I did. But I remember it was coming up to Christmas, and I was at the point where Santa Claus was maybe coming, and or was he not? So anyhow, I remember going down and pretending I was kind of dead, and I waited, and I didn't get up, so I frightened the daylights out of which I did, and I remembered well. But we became the best of friends after that.
Of course. Would you think you were one of her favourites, or was she?
I don't. I don't.
You can't say, of course.
But I don't think that is the case, because I think we all know as parents that, you know, whether it's a favourite or sometimes maybe things in common or...
Yeah. I think that's part of it as well. Like, I totally understand that. I have 3 little ones as well. And again, they're so different. You can't really say, you know, you have your moments, of course, like everybody else, but it's
exactly
great. So what was your dad like then?
He was, Daddy was, I suppose, very gentle, beautiful singer.
Oh.
Had spent a lot of his time in Dublin, in their early marriage, coming up and down, working in Dublin.
That was very normal in the day, wasn't it? Really,
Probably,
as well?
yeah. And then there was great talks of us moving to Dublin. He had a house for us, but it never quite happened.
Right.
And I'm advancing now to my way beyond schooling, but I remember he developed MS.
Oh, right.
And that was a real... we were all very aware that he was unwell. And of course, it changed the energy in the family.
Of course it did. Like, so he was the main guy. He was the leader of the gang and the bread earner, I presume, as well, travelling up and down.
Yes, and also had this thought or this thinking that if he could just get land, so he bought a couple of farms from his earnings in Dublin, and so he had three farms, and it came to something like 110 acres, which seemed a lot at the time.
Yeah. And who was managing those? Like, did he get you guys to get involved? Or?
Yes, we used to milk the cows, but he believed in the cattle looking after themselves more or less and putting the calves on the cows. So he always got healthier.
Yeah.
And so he always felt that if you had a walking stick and go out and see the cattle, but put your time into building,
right,
it was the best return.
But you'd also gone to a local school now. What kind of schooling was that for you before you started taking on that?
Well, we went to the local school, which was Co.Laois, as I mentioned earlier, and I think there was something like 70 kids in it.
It was big enough.
Big enough, yeah.
But was it all ages together in the same room, or did you have...
No,
yeah.
well, up to, is it senior infants or a bit
right,
beyond?
Okay, yeah.
And so I remember being 14 there the last year, but I don't remember a lot more of it.
No.
I know and there wasn't a lot of violence in the school. I mean, we used to occasionally get the hand out, but I don't remember it as being a...
You probably wouldn't dare, Paddy. I think the schooling is different. Like today, there's no slap at the hand or the ruler.
No,
I think the terror isn't the same.
Correct.
You know.
But it was in our time now, I'd say that. But then I saw with my brother Christy, there was a different teacher, and that turned out to be very difficult, because I think he was an alcoholic, and he took it out my brother Christy, and then my parents moved him from that school. But
okay.
I had nothing but. And then when we left there, we went to the local technical school in Roscrea, and that would involve us riding in every day. It was about 6 miles, maybe.
Now, was this horse and carriage or bikes?
Bikes.
You never know. You're on the farm.
No, it was bicycles. And my brother Phil and I were involved in it. I tend to leave early, and Phil would leave a bit later. But, you know, I suppose in the winter too, you had to be conscious of having the leggings, which we would have had, the water, which we had all that at the time. And so I'd say that we were relatively well off, and there was certainly never a shortage of food, and we all grew up to be very healthy.
Brilliant.
And
it's great to be able to say that, isn't it, as well?
But I remember the baking. Now, Mother would bake about, I'm not exaggerating, a dozen loaves. And I remember the washing of the clothes. It was a hand wringer. Of course, later on, you moved to a different washer, as you'd understand. But I remember you'd be, I think it was called wringing out.
Right.
But what jumped into my mind now, I remember, you'd be pulling the clothes and you'd give a quick... And I had done that a few times with my mother, which sounds very playful.
Yeah.
But I remember that.
Oh.
Yeah.
They're the little memories that really make a difference, don't they? And like you're just talking about family, and as you're talking, I'm just thinking of the little things. Same with it could be you walking around. Dad would come out from freezing cold working in the yard or whatever,
yes.
and we'd be sitting there nice and warm, and he'd put his cold hand on you, and you'd jump about 2 foot, and they're the things that make you as well, because you have to have fun. You really do, I think.
I think you nearly have to be a parent, though, to understand your own parents, because the sheer joy of having children, which we're all familiar with, but I don't think you see that in your parents when you're the child and you're looking at them.
Yeah.
But once your turn comes, and I'd feel that until your own children have children, they don't fully understand the love and the joy and the compromise that's involved.
And do you think you are familiar or similar to your parents on some level as well, that you brought on certain traits?
I think you're bound to be, aren't you?
Yeah. Do you ever notice yourself doing things or saying things?
Without doubt. Yeah. Especially as you get older, because it kind of rings in your ear what they said, and no, I'd be very, very conscious of that, and I suppose extending back to thinking of your parents and grandparents. Now, in our case, on my father's side, my great-grandfather, who would have been part of the Land League with David, and he spent 5 years in Mount George
Okay.
as one of the... So we have a full record of every day he was in jail of the trial. And Lynn Riley has just digitised that story now.
Right.
So it'll be there, because we produced a book, my brother Phil, Mickey Kelly and Paddy Lawler. This was in 1999, 2000, on his story, on his history, which was very important to us all.
Yeah. It's really important. And you were saying about your dad when he became ill.
Yes.
It changed the whole dynamic within the family as
Well,
well.
it changed the income profile.
Yeah.
But I was about, I suppose, maybe 15, maybe 16, 15. My brother Tom and I were often saying Kieran's College earlier when they were young, because Tom is now 82. He's 2.5 years older than I am. Michael 1.25. But neither of them liked it. And Mike in particular would say it was a tough station. A lot of beaten, as in not between the students, but I think it was Christian Brothers. I'm not sure. Was in Kieran's College Christian Brothers? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And and we were all familiar with those stories now. So Ireland has moved on, and
It has. Like you look at the educational system now, it's completely different
exactly
to what you had to go through. And even, I suppose, when I was younger as well, I can remember I had nuns in the school. They were still there, like not necessarily in their full habits or whatever as well. But I mean, it was a different kind of respect as well. And you also had, if they said jump, you jumped.
Yeah, well, it was fearful, wasn't it?
It was full of fear as well.
Yeah.
Occasionally you come across some amazing nuns and teachers. And we can't say all of them were like that. But I have to say, like, it makes you stronger in a lot of ways as well. And very, you remind yourself what you're not going to do when you even think about some of the behaviour from the past.
Yes.
You know, and I think that's one of the things you've been very accountable of yourself over the years as well, from growing and seeing your dad get ill and taking on lessons.
I think so. I think in the sense that I think we all come, I suppose, in a sense, in a certain package, certain tendencies. I think no two people are the same. No two handprints are the same. So in our case, we naturally got involved in building because that's what the family did going back, I'd say, centuries. And development. And I don't think we were ever good farmers.
Right. Were you a good farmer?
Hopeless. And Annie too, her cousin, would say, well, of course, the cattle would die with us, you know.
But then you went into the building side of it.
Yeah, we did. But that was an extension of what my father did.
Right.
And with my brother Tom and Mike and Phil in particular, because the family, the first two, then Phil and myself, and then the second half of the family later. And so that was very natural for us. I remember the first bungalow we got involved in was for a Larry Power. I suppose I was nearly 16 and a half, 17.
Practically a man at that stage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wasn't 16 a grown-up stage?
I think so, but
time?
I remember it was still a little challenge to lift, you know, a bag of cement.
Right.
It was heavy enough now. But you grew, or you were growing, and then, of course...
Did you start on the ground floor? Like you didn't suddenly go into development. You had to learn all the process as well.
Your job always was, when you went on initially on the building sites, was to make the tea and help out.
Isn't that nice? That's good.
But then we learned certain skills in the vocational school, so it wasn't as if though the school hadn't an influence.
Brilliant.
And I was in Tipperary a couple of years ago now. And I spoke to Larry Power at the time because he was on Catherine Fox's farm. He'd bought a house there. And I said, what do you remember of me? Did I ask that? He said, you always had a notebook, which I had and I still have. Because you're taking notes and you're writing things down and you're not trusting your memory, really.
That was something you learned by yourself, or was that something somebody before you did, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you can't just trust your memory.
Right.
Now, maybe you think you can, but...
I agree with you. I totally agree. I like the idea of writing stuff down. Actually, we do have that in common, you know.
Yes.
I love diaries.
They talk about journaling, and I think if you do that, it creates awareness, or you're more conscious of
They say you learn better if you write it down.
Yeah.
You're more likely to remember
Yeah.
appointments and people and
I have
information.
little doubt myself. But as you go on then, see, technology has changed the game totally.
It has.
I mean, I used to do a lot of dictation in the earlier years and somebody to type it out and go onto the file. Now I have a huge problem trying to relate to, where is it? People like my age or my time, you're looking for help, and of course you get it in your kids, but in particular your grandchildren.
Yeah.
Because they have been born into it.
Oh, and they just, especially my three, they look at me and
Yes.
I can't do it fast enough.
Of course you
Like, what
can't.
am I doing? I'm just messing around if I'm on technology.
Yes.
No, I'm good enough, but their speed is insane.
It's-
How they
it's-
manage to do that.
It's instinctive, isn't it? Or
Yeah, it is. And it's learned.
Yes.
Like if you're exposed to something very early, I suppose you absorb it organically. And that's one of the things perhaps I would say maybe with what you started to do in the building trade, you had been observing through your dad for years.
Yeah, well, of course you would. No, he had a huge advantage in the sense he was very patient, and he would say, when we'd be putting in foundations, he'd say, "Now, lads, just go and check it. You'd have them all done, have a cup of tea, but just throw a line around."
Right.
So measure twice and saw once became something we were very familiar with.
So are you like that in general about everything you do? Would you check it over?
I like to think I do,
Yeah,
but of course there has to also be flow.
totally. Yeah.
So you're in a pathway in a sense with purpose. And we used to say, "Pookie, pookie, snails, put out your horns."
Okay. You're going to have to explain that one.
Well, the pookie snail,
I do.
eyes are at the top of his little horns,
Yeah.
and he's or she, don't know he or she,
yeah.
they're going along and
Or they.
feeling their way. So I think life is a bit like that.
Yeah.
But of course, also you can get, storms, as in weather. You can get the economic turmoil coming your way. You don't have as much control as you might like to think. You can control a certain area, but I think going with the flow and guiding, I think has a strong influence.
Yeah.
I suppose a form of submission, I would say.
Yeah.
To
But also
what?
a sense of direction as well. Because if you look back, looking at the construction side and the business side of who you are, that's fascinating because you're a team player, aren't you? You love working with people.
Yeah. Well, I love to think that. Well, I always think, you see, that, and maybe it is in my case that I wasn't good at certain things, but I would write down the 360 and try and fill in the influences that are within 360, and you say, okay, what can I do well? In my mind, I would always have been able to coordinate, and maybe observe, and in some ways not get too involved.
Right.
I think that's part of my personality. But everybody is born different, and then you develop off your base.
I think also being honest about your limitations is really important and what you're good at and what you're not, because
Yes.
sometimes people take on too much. I know I used to before. I used to try and do everything
Yes.
because I could, and up to a
Yes.
certain point. But then you realise as well, are you doing it as well as you could be with a team of people who are even better than you? You know.
Well, there's no question. You see, specialisation, like a good architect, changes how buildings are. Poor architect also changes.
Yeah.
A good engineer. So you do need very competent people.
Yeah.
And of course, you have to be mindful too of the need for discipline and records. But too much bureaucracy kills, and it kills momentum. And I think that's kind of, in some way, where Ireland is now. Certainly when it comes to housing, it's so difficult to engage in the process.
And for you, working with your brothers, how was that to start off with?
I'd say aspect of it fantastic. More parts would be challenging because you have the competition, and there was a tendency. I know Mike, Tom was the one in our home or our family, I suppose, that had this huge, I'd say, care for us all and love for us all, and would, and his presence was always. It brought calm, if I could say.
Yeah.
Mike doing his own thing.
Yeah.
I suppose I or I would have had more partners than I've had, years. And I believe in it because it's amazing what comes. Maybe it's like the ingredients in a cake, and we've touched on it a little bit earlier. But I'm such a believer that together we're better. But it needs a lot of discipline, and it needs referees.
And did you like taking on that kind of responsibility of the collective? Because that's something that you seem to thrive on.
Yeah. My sense is that, and it sounds grandiose, but I essentially believe we're all one. And the separation, while it's real, but it's more or less an illusion. I've little doubt myself, together we're better. But starting and finishing is also, when do you start something, when do you finish it? That has a big influence. See, on building sites, there was a start and a finish. Now, in other businesses, not. So how do you keep the checks and balances, current? That can be a challenge.
Yeah.
And a sense of urgency. So when you become familiar with what happens in the States, restructuring is part and parcel of how they run their businesses. And they'd have a different understanding of failure than we'd have in this country.
It sounds like it's been quite a journey for you, so far up to this point as well. And I'm curious to see when and what point did you move with the construction and move from Laois up the road? And I'm sure you have a little bit of a story behind that one as well.
Yeah, well, we had moved from Clonmore, from where Clonmore, Grogan, Port County, that was the address, to Thurles. And we built our second bungalow in Thurles. And in particular, my brother Phil and myself. And I remember we built another, I think it was more than a bungalow, or it was a big bungalow for Co.Laois. And
now, when you say build, you're talking about putting out the foundations.
And a lot, yeah.
Because I can remember when my dad built our house, a bungalow, when I was very little as well.
Yes.
And he put out a piece of wood or stick with a
Yes,
piece of
that's
string.
right.
And was that just for levelling it off and that kind of stuff?
Because you had to, you'd have a set of plans. You had to obviously read the plans. And foundation, you'd start with the foundations. And at that stage, they had to be dug up by hand.
Yeah.
Now, later, of course, the JCBs, as we'd call them, they were pure, pure energy, speed, and you'd be watching it working.
And mixing the concrete, I can remember him on this board.
That's right.
Shoveling it in.
Yes.
And he made a little, volcano and poured the water in.
Yes.
Old school.
That's right.
Yeah.
But building sites, you see, are about camaraderie. Daddy would always say, come on, lads. He'd never say, go on, lads. So it was always a team. There was a team spirit and great fun. So we came to Dublin in 1967 and we had built hundreds of houses around the country. And we'd got a contract to build, I think it was 146 houses for Dublin Corporation. Now that was very challenging for us because you had to have security. We never had to have that before on the sites because theft was fairly normal.
Wow.
But it was all a shock for us. And but we managed to complete it. And then we had to restructure the company because we had lost money. But in the meantime, we had bought land in Selbridge.
Nice area.
Yeah, and it was inside the gates of Castletown.
Lovely. Yeah.
On the left-hand side. And very quickly we lined up with an English company called Pace Johnson. And I think that was a huge learning for me in particular, but for my broader family, because you saw building being executed, if you like, at a very professional level. So we used to love going across to England and see how they did it. And they were building 1,000 homes a year. But Johnny Johnson, the leader, was he was a poet, maybe a painter. So he seemed to be able to do that and also do other things.
Yeah. Whereas
we were more focused on maybe one aspect of life, lots and lots of work. So he seemed to be able to, I remember he buying land in Australia and had development down there and also in Scotland. And I found it amazing at the time.
And for you, was that something you absorbed and were inspired by and have brought forward?
Without doubt. Because you learned then about structure, as in he had a managing director. There was, I remember an architect, and Mike Robinson was the managing director, and he was a great engineer, big man, big long steps. And of course we had then in our minds at some level, the English thing, the Irish thing, was the tension was there. My great-grandfather had been in jail. So you were kind of aware. And then we were aware also of, I suppose, the stories about the black and tans. Yeah. My mother used to tell those stories. And they were horrific. But then you were learning, you were partaking. And of course, the current people that weren't involved directly then, maybe their lineage. But that was a horrific time in Ireland.
Yeah. And would you have sat with your mum? Because we'll talk about her. I think that's really important because I'm very lucky. I still have my mum as well.
Yes.
But so powerful, the influence that the mammy has on both of us, really, I suppose, as well. Would she have sat with you and told you the stories about them?
Oh, absolutely. I suppose, and it's not an exaggeration, but I remember, I suppose really, you could say falling in love with Mother, Yeah. And she, because she laid out, when we'd go to Mass, we'd all have these blue suits on, and we'd be all altar boys, all that. So you had to be perfect when you turned out. Yeah. Then you come home immediately, but take off your clothes and then put on your plate clothes. And I see some of the photographs, how well we were turned out. Mother was I suppose if you think about it, she was very proud of her sons.
Of course.
And but had to work hard. And I'd say myself, when Daddy and herself got married, I'd say there was an expectation that she'd be coming to Dublin.
Right, from her at the start.
I'd say so.
Right, okay.
And she ends up in the farm. Can you
I know, with all of the boys.
But then she was very popular in the neighbourhood.
Ah.
And maybe 2 evenings a week, people would play cards.
Oh, what did they play? Poker or Jim
Whist, I'd say
Whist.
Yeah,
oh, right, okay,
or maybe 25.
Oh, yeah, that's a great game.
And so that was, I think, she always had great company. Across the bog with a man called Dan Fogarty, and we had the Ryans. And there was great friendship, you see. There was great neighbourliness.
And music featured as well. Would that have been part of it?
Always in our house, because Daddy was a beautiful singer. And then the Kellys had a band with the one, the Flacco, lots of stuff. It was real. We used to hear about it, but when we checked it out, it was all real. Great musicians.
Brilliant.
Now, Brian Riley is in that whole field. And, of course, I can see his love for it. And
and did you ever play an instrument, or was there a moment?
We had a little band called the Black Knights.
Right.
And so the night I met Maureen, Phil and Liam and myself.
Maureen is your wife.
Yes.
We're jumping ahead here, which is great.
we'll rope back.
Big romance, yes.
We had the little trio.
Yeah.
And an uncle of hers that was back from South Africa. So I remember that night well.
Now, was this the first time you met Maureen?
Yes. And we had just a little band. But we had a band, you see, down at home called the Black Knights. So we practiced a lot, and we kind of went on the road a little bit, not hugely, and decided in the end. I remember there was a moment we said, no, we'll go with the building. But one of the things that has forever surprised me, because I wasn't aware of it, but one of our chaps, Sherwin, I know he died from drug taking, which amazed me, because I never knew anything about it.
Yeah. It wasn't part of your world at that, even with the music, but
no,
it's very unfortunate.
We'd be very strict now. There was no going to pubs. Or we went into a pub, you'd be looking around the corner. We didn't go to pubs.
Yeah.
And I mean, my first drink was, I suppose, 21, just testing a few drinks.
Right. Would that have been the pioneer thing in the household?
Oh, very much.
Wasn't that very? You got the pin, and
yes,
I was weird the same. My mum and dad were pioneers up until a few years ago.
Well, there was the fear of alcohol, and I'm not sure in our family where it came from.
Yeah.
And there was some talk about my grandfather was a Hale, but he was the local engineer in Leaks, so he'd be meeting a lot of people.
Right.
And having a drink, or it'd be part and parcel of his life. But Mother used to talk a little bit about that. But there definitely was fear of alcohol.
Yeah. Who knows where that came from? Because it was certainly that with the pioneers in our house as well. But
sure, Ireland was whiskey, you're the devil.
Oh, I can't take the stuff.
Yeah.
Can't even stand in a room with somebody drinking whiskey.
Yes.
So maybe that's hereditary as well.
Yeah.
Who knows? That could be
Well,
part of it.
yeah, to say that it's all from some past.
You never know. I
Yeah.
did have an uncle who liked it a lot.
Yes.
Maybe that
Well,
way. it is.
I always think, first of all, it's an important part of society, I think, but it needs, too many pubs, and if it becomes the culture, for me now it turns into escapism.
Oh, absolutely. I think for a lot of people there can be a social aspect, which is really important. But
Yeah, which it is,
if it goes any further than
Yes.
that. But if you think back, like as you had in your house, you would have, and same in mine, people and neighbours would come over and you'd play cards and
Yes.
you'd have drink there. Maybe you'd be
Well,
lucky
we
to have
wouldn't have had
an old.
drink in the home now. There was
Oh no,
no-
same here as well.
Yeah.
But I know in neighbours' houses or whatever, there might have
Yes.
been something brought out. But we were shocked if we saw alcohol in somebody's house.
Yes.
Like it was never in ours as well. But I'm fascinated because you're talking about your first was one of your performances, and you met this beauty
Yes.
called Maureen. Tell me the
Yes.
story. I'm
Well,
fascinated.
no,
now.
well, what happened there was, I remember Maureen had sang a song. I think it was maybe the pub with no beer. I'm not sure. But on the way down in the Gresham, downstairs,
Nice.
we're going to sit down and have
That
the
was a
meal.
good spot to go to.
on a New Year's Eve.
Ah.
I think it was yes, it was the second last day of the year. And I said to Maureen, "Can I sit beside you?"
Now wait, hold on a second. Did you think she's lovely before you sat beside her?
Of course, yeah. Because
Yeah.
you'd have your for the corner of your eye.
It wasn't an accidental. I need a seat.
Well, who knows? But it was a way. But of course, we were well used to being out and about. And,
Yeah, of course.
And it was, what was it? That was 1967, the last day, second last day. So I'd have been 23, is it?
Oh,
Almost 24.
yeah, 24.
So you've been out and about.
Yeah.
And so, of course, the answer was yes. And that's where our romance started.
Oh, lovely. See, that was the day there was no mobile phones. Like,
Right.
look at them now. Everybody's texting each other. And
Yes.
even then, if you sit beside somebody, it's almost foreign if you have a conversation.
It is, yeah.
And there's a whole generation just thinking you're strange if you talk to me. So, but
Yes.
to sit beside somebody, it's so, like, what was it like first few moments? Did you just
Well, I suppose
hit it off, I
there
suppose?
is such a thing as falling in love. And I don't think there's any doubt about it.
Oh, for sure.
No, they say you really grow into love.
Do you
Um,
think, Paddy, you grow into love? Or can you just love somebody
think-
instantly?
I think you can. I'd say that.
Yeah.
I think that's. But I think there's also. I was watching a program the other morning, and this chap said his wife married him, and she says, "I don't love you," but 7 years later, they had grown into love. So I think there's different experiences.
Different people,
Yeah.
yeah. That's it.
And I suppose in our time it was so normal to break up when you had your girlfriend, and then a little bit later everybody's getting married. Marian and I were the first in our gang.
How long did you date before you? A
We
few
were
years?
married 18 months later.
Oh,
And I remember I had a friendship with a girl called Catherine Leahy, and Maureen had a friendship as well. And it was about 3 months to tidy up those.
Yeah.
Because you had to somehow move on. I hope this is not getting too sloppy.
it's okay. We can edit. Put an edit on that one there. So, Maureen and you just hit it off from
Yeah.
that first meeting.
I think so. Well, it's certainly in my mind
Yeah.
there was a seed sown.
Ah, lovely.
And so it became part and parcel of, you get into your dreams, don't you?
Yeah.
And then later on, when you link up, then you have your plans. And I always remember our first home was a mobile home.
I can say mine was a mobile home while we were building as well. So,
Yes,
yeah.
and we parked it down in Selbridge. And of course, at that stage, sure, it's just perfect.
Yeah,
you
and
know.
the size of the bathroom and a
Correct.
tiny little kitchen.
Yes,
That's-
but it was,
Yeah.
I remember the bed was the full size of the bedroom.
Yes.
You'd hardly be able to get into it, but that was an advantage.
Well, you didn't care. You honestly didn't care, because I think that's the thing about love is that it's not how big something is or what's going on around you. It's what's
Yes.
going on between you.
Well, we know so in the sense that then your dreams, you consolidate. And of course, once children are there, it's amazing for a woman. I know men and women are separate, and But at that time, the woman would have more the responsibility of the children than now. No,
Yeah.
you'd be
Yeah.
playing the supportive role.
Absolutely.
But once, when I remember when Emma was born, and then Maureen bringing her home, or we bringing her home. I mean, it was you had total innocence. Now, in Maureen's case, she had helped to rear some of her own younger children,
Right. Yeah.
so she had a certain amount of experience there,
Her siblings and that. So yeah.
especially with David and Anne,
Right.
and so that experience was there.
And what age were you when you had your first child then? So
Emma was born in 1970.
26.
So I was 26.
That's a good age, isn't it? Just
It is, yeah.
Did Maureen find that
Maureen was-
easy? Was parenting straightforward, or
I think very.
Yeah.
It was so natural.
that's it? You see,
Yeah.
like you say, she had siblings that.
Yeah. But you had the joy around it, and then Simon coming in. And then we had the kind of 4 families in a sense, or 3 families. Emma and Simon. Simon was born, he'll be soon 52 at the end of during December. Then we waited about 7 years for Christopher, and that was a kind of a deliberate thought, maybe more on my side. And then again, we had another 7 years or 8 years for John, our youngest. John is now 37,
Brilliant.
and Emma's 54 in January. So there's a big gap.
But knowing you, it was well planned, and you knew where you were
Well,
going on
in
the
a-
journey with
in
life.
in a
and-
sense, yeah. But
Yeah.
I suppose I'm such a believer in consciousness and the spirit that you're playing a role, but you're not the only role, not the only player.
yeah.
You're part of this amazing creation.
I feel the same with my 3 as well. I absolutely knew. I
Yes.
knew that they were there for me. I'll tell you a funny story, because I can remember when I had the first 2, I kept going back into the house to check for the other baby. And it was so funny, because I had absolutely made a decision. 2 was great.
Yes.
And sure enough, Erin came along and
Yeah.
brought all of Ireland with her, that
Yes.
wonderful energy. So I totally understand what you're saying. And there's lots of people who get that as well. That you just have that sense,
Yes.
that you're here for a lot more than just what you do.
Yes.
Because the construction was a big part of your life still, even at that stage. So Maureen was rearing the kids and you were out creating.
but I think we were certainly a very active couple, and in my case, you see, I was always working in conjunction with, and so whether it be true or not, I've always felt in life that there's a lot of time, and that time offers you the opportunity, especially if you're orientated towards observation and learning, which I certainly am, and of course you're meeting people. And going out for dinner was a very big thing.
Right.
I remember meeting John Flynn and Lee. John has died now 3 years ago. But we always had these people we went out for dinner, and more so than today. And to be a sense of celebration, certainly around projects and achievements, always. But a sense of small celebrations that you're going through life. There's moments of, you could say, of good fortune, toss a coin almost. And then you celebrate. So that was always a big part of our lives.
Brilliant.
And living, when we lived in Shrewsbury Road, which we did for about 35 years, there was something like 90 children on the road. So everybody played together, everybody had fun together. And that, to me, took me back down to home, as in, you're playing with your neighbours. It was all it was a big family. Now, I don't know if there's less to that now, because I see our own kids, their kids have their friends too. So I'm not so sure if it has changed that much.
Yeah.
But I was very conscious of that togetherness, or doing things, celebrating, achieving, learning. And travel, of course, is so important.
Yeah. But also you were such a major player when it came to putting places for other people to experience what you had grown up with. So community always was a big part of your work, even.
I love to think that. And I remember one of the first projects that we did was Castle Court in Booterstown in Dublin. And the people who came and bought there was a real sense of community. Only 50 people, of course. And that was in the early 70s. And it was very popular. And so we lived there for a little while, not very long, between houses, because we had moved ourselves. We lived in Treelgan Road, and we lived in Clyde Road for a little while. And we used to rent the houses sometimes, having lived there. You'd be moving, you'd be buying a new house, renting it. And there was a great belief in property then as an asset. Maybe less so now.
I think it's definitely an asset these days, given.
Yes, but I think we had a stronger belief. I think people kind of believe now it should be on a plate for you. And you don't even have to save for it. And the mortgage is there, everything is going to be there for you. Whereas at our time, we had to put a lot of effort in. And I'm not saying people don't, but I think there's, and you had to save the deposit. And you had to build up a record of saving. Now, I expect that's happening today as well.
Yeah, in a different way, I think, as well, because a whole different generation, you have to jump through different psychological loopholes. And
yes,
I think the physicality definitely was there for you, because the foundation has always been a theme I see around you, even when you're talking there about putting a solid foundation in place.
Yes.
When it comes to your own life, your family, and also putting the businesses and the homes together for other people to thrive from. So it's a good ground floor to start from, isn't it, really?
Yeah, my father used to say that when you've built a house, you'll have learned a lot.
Yeah.
And I suppose when people have bought, and then it was a form of, you see, of saving. People you were being forced to pay the mortgage. So it restricted the time you'd be going out. And I think that was the way that most people were then.
Yeah.
There were some exceptions. But don't forget, wealth in Ireland only started to form, maybe it was in the 60s, because it was this would be, shall we say, the ordinary Irish, if I can use that term.
Yes.
And because ascendancy money was different. And there was a lot of privilege with it.
Right.
So there was great sense in Ireland of Ireland somehow, against all the odds, starting to do well. But then we had these major corrections, which I suppose looking forward, I'd love to think that people in my age group would pass back as much as they can in what they could, perceive as knowledge, maybe it could be of use. And I have a great belief that when you combine the different age groups, you can create magic.
Well, you certainly have been for quite a while. It's one of those things I'm looking forward to talking to you again and developing some of this conversation further. I mean, the sense of family that you talk about is so familiar, because it doesn't matter what generation you're from. I could feel the same kind of moral code, the same kind of love, same kind of aspirations. Everybody wants everybody around them happy and to be healthy as well. I think that's a big thing for you, isn't it?
I suppose health really is number one. Yeah. And what is happiness? Is it the chicken and the egg? And where does joy come in? I think a mindset of, I'd say, gratitude.
Yeah.
Every morning. Because if you are healthy, especially at my age, because quite a few of my friends have moved on. And my father used to say that one of the problems of living longer is all your friends move on within reason. And you say, but learning to deal with changing circumstances is very important.
And you know something? I think that would be a great point for us to say the next time we get together. Why don't we talk about that as well? And also talk more about your life. Talk about the foundations, what you've done, the lessons that people can learn from as well. And hopefully I'll give a few of those as well, which would be fantastic.
I have no doubt.
Yeah, great stuff.
And
Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much.